There we go. That looks a little better. Fantastic. So thanks for coming out to CommCon. It's one of my favorite events every year. I was telling somebody yesterday that this feels like family. I mean, I've been hanging out with some of y'all for close to 20 years, doing voice over IP work and working in the open source community and those sorts of things. So this is like a family reunion for me. So I'm happy to be here. Those who know me a little bit better know that I kind of have a passion for photography, and so most of my slides up here are just going to be pictures. Some of those are going to be really, really obvious what I'm talking about, and some of those you're going to look at the picture and you're going to go, So we'll see if we can keep you on your toes. Anybody know what the first rule of photography is? Good guess. The number one rule of photography is to make sure that your focus isn't, the subject of your photo is in focus and in sharp focus. Of course, that's only the case if you actually want it to be in focus. Sometimes you actually want to use a little bit of blur to add some sort of creative element to your, to your photo. So that's kind of why I titled this talk "Blurring the Lines," is because I actually wanted to blur kind of the traditional broadcast media and telecommunications world, talk about how some of the new modern technologies kind of blur the lines of what was traditional way of doing that, what are the new ways of doing that. There used to be a really strong delineation between this is broadcast and this is telecommunications, and it's all a big mess today. So let's get into that. I'm not going to show a bunch of detailed charts or graphs. It's not going to be super scientific. This is going to be the most scientific chart I have up here. And this is actually, anybody know what this is? No, it's not, actually. It's close. This is the alternation, so if you take the center here of the circle, those are the original 8 colors that were in a box of Crayola crayons. And over the years, they've changed the colors, and now you have the 128 colors or whatever it is in the outside. But that's as technical as we're going to get here today. So I always submit 2 talks to CommCon. I put in a technical talk, and I put in kind of a more higher level, community-oriented talk. Dan always takes my non-technical talk for some reason. I don't know why. So anyway, this is going to be non-technical. Another way of putting this is I'm going to be giving you some building blocks and then let you use your imagination and see where things go from there. I absolutely love this advertisement from Lego from several years ago because I love playing with Lego blocks, and that's an airplane and that's a dinosaur, and we're going to build something fun with these building blocks. I will point out that these opinions kind of come from my point of view. I obviously have different experiences and different thoughts than you do, so you might have a different point of view. You might be just saying, there's another old man yelling at the cloud. We'll see. All right, a little bit of background. So I grew up in a small village in the state of Wyoming in the United States. And if you're wondering, well, where is Wyoming? It's one of those rectangular flyover states in the middle of nowhere, high in the Rocky Mountains, about 6,500 feet of elevation. This is what it looks like in the wintertime, which is about 9 months out of the year. Every once in a while we have summer, and sometimes it falls on a weekend. This is what it looks like in the summertime. And now this was a remote village. I'm talking about I had to climb in a car and drive more than an hour to see the nearest stoplight. Or for you, from the UK here, I had to drive more than an hour to find the nearest roundabout. That's how remote this village is, okay? And so I didn't have a lot of opportunities to maybe experience some of the things that other people did my age that maybe grew up in the city. I had to kind of learn to live vicariously. I read a lot of books. I watched what TV and movies I could, but there wasn't a lot of choices for media growing up. One more picture of Wyoming, because I still love it there. I love my Rocky Mountains. This is a panorama that I took from my hometown a couple of years ago. Over against this mountain right here, this is where my high school was. If you were to zoom in on one of those mountains, there would be a little TV repeater up on the top of the mountain. Now, I couldn't find a picture of that actual TV repeater, so I found another one from the high plains of Wyoming. This is how we got television into my little village, was with a television repeater. They would actually broadcast a microwave signal from the next state over, from Idaho, and then broadcast it onto one of these repeater towers, and then it would transmit that over VHF. And obviously, repairs on those repeaters was hard, especially in the wintertime. And so growing up, I had 2 television channels. Not a lot of choice. You could watch NBC or CBS, and that was it. About the time I graduated from high school, they got a 3rd television channel. They got ABC in the United States. So 3 choices of what to watch on TV. Needless to say, I did not watch a lot of television. I watched Saturday morning cartoons and sometimes something after school, but there wasn't a lot of choice, so I didn't end up watching a lot of television. But I did watch a lot of videos, what we could get our hands on, including this 1987 classic, The Princess Bride. Now, when I was, 12 or 13 years old, my dad decided to put one of these big, huge 14-foot satellite dishes in our backyard, and this was kind of the golden age of watching television over satellite. Why do I call it the golden age? Because you could actually pick up the raw feeds from the networks as they were transmitting them, like from a remote location or from a sports venue, back to their studios to do the editing and putting the ads in and all that kind of stuff. So you could see the raw feeds without any ads, and it was fantastic. I remember watching it was the Calgary Winter Olympics. I can't remember when that was, 1988, I don't know, 86, I don't know, yes, somewhere in the mid to late 80s, watching all the Olympic feeds, but it was the raw footage before it got all, edited and filtered and everything, and so you got to see what was really happening at the Olympics. That was a lot of fun. Later on, the satellite companies made it more complicated. They started scrambling the signals, and you had to buy descramblers, and then you had to subscribe to actually see the channels, and then it kind of went away and it became overly commercialized. So that kind of went the way of all the earth. The satellite dish is no longer in my backyard. The pole that held up the satellite dish is still there. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is a lot of you probably know me from the work that I've done in the voice over IP community, but I actually got an early start in video long before I started playing with voice over IP. And the first real video programming project I did was actually a final project for a computer science class in high school. So my senior year of high school, I was taking physics and I was taking computer science. And our computer science project was to get on these brand new Apple Macintosh, fancy computers, and use HyperCard to build some sort of a project. And because I wanted to study for my physics tests at the same time I was working on my computer science project, I built a project that used a serial connection between the computer and the Laserdisc player, and then it would pop up these quizzes about physics problems, and if you missed one of the problems on the quiz, then it would show the appropriate chapter from the Laserdisc to show you, here's how this physics thing works, and here's why you got the problem wrong, which was kind of fun. So that was how I kind of got my start in video. Somewhere along the way, somebody shared these 4 steps with me of how to be a great public speaker, and I've already not done this, right? You're supposed to start with a polite greeting, you're supposed to state your name, you're supposed to give some context and why you're relevant to the audience, and then you're supposed to set some expectations appropriately. Little did I know I should have just paid attention to that movie that I talked about earlier called The Princess Bride, right? Number 1, there's your polite greeting. Number 2, state your name. Number 3, give some context and some relevance. And then number 4, set expectations. So hello, my name is Jared Smith. I'm a father, I'm a geek. I like to tell dad jokes, sometimes even laughs at my jokes. I love open source. I've had a fantastic career doing lots of things related to developer relations, community engagement, with open source, with voice over IP, with video on the internet. I'm Lorenzo's #1 fan on Spotify. And I want to share some thoughts today about, like I said, about blurring the lines between traditional media, traditional telecoms, and kind of the way things are happening on the internet. But it's a lot to cover, right? I don't have time to sum it all up. So we're going to go fairly quickly here. I don't want to stand between you and lunch. So we'll go through this kind of quickly. I do want lots of participation. This is not death by PowerPoint. So if you have a comment, just yell it out or raise your hand if you don't feel like yelling out. Give me feedback, nod your head if things are making sense. If you're confused, shake your head this way. That's how I'll know that this is going okay. All right, let's get into blurring the lines. how do we actually measure whether this newfangled way of doing things, of sending media across the internet, is actually better? Thoughts, ideas? I put up a few ideas up here, but I don't have a corner on all the great answers. How do we tell if voice over IP, video over IP, streaming media, features? That's
does more things.
Does more things. Yep, I think we can put that into agility. Yeah. Is it used? You can measure usage. That's a great way of measuring things. Other ideas? I mean, I put a few up here: cost, convenience, access control, complexity.
People willing to pay for it.
Willing to pay for it. That's all great measurements. So just so I can get a gauge of the audience here, how many people come from kind of like the telecommunications, voice over IP, that sort of space? Looks like about 2/3 of the audience. How many of the audience come from more of the broadcast media, video space? Couple here, one in the back. That's great. How many people didn't raise their hand or are asleep? A couple more. That's good. So we do have some variety in the room, so we'll have some different experiences and maybe some different comments here. First of all, I want to kind of set the stage in the context and talk about really 3 different types of media, and I'm going to use video as an example since I most recently worked for a video company. There's really 3 types of media that we want to talk about. The first is live media, right? This is a sports event or a live television broadcast or somebody live streaming their programming on a project on Twitch. We'll talk about that first. The next one is kind of video on demand. This is where video's already done, pre-recorded, but they want to watch that on demand. That's your video rental, that's your Netflix, that's your YouTube, that sort of thing. And then last, we'll talk about real-time communication. This is your conference calls, this is your Zoom call, this is your Jitsi Meet, those sorts of applications. So how have we blurred the lines in all 3 of these types of media? Let's start with live video. And again, it doesn't have to be video, but we'll use that as an example. For those who have some background in kind of the traditional broadcast media space, what happens in the studio? How do you actually transmit that video? There's cameras, there's microphones. It goes into a control booth. You have people like the AV people at the back of the room that are, adjusting audio levels and making sure your slides look good and, making it all look really professional when maybe the presenter isn't as professional as he should be. Then it gets stuck into some amplifiers, and in the case of television, it probably gets piped out over a cable or maybe to a broadcast tower and gets sent out over the airwaves. Right? What happens on the reception side? Yeah, demodulation of the signal, and it gets thrown on the screen, whether it's whether it's a CRT that's a cathode ray that's actually painting the dots on the screen, or it's more modern thing like an LCD or an OLED. It's basically taking that signal and turning it into pixels of a particular color and a particular brightness, and we view that. What does it take to do all that? Both the transmission side and the reception side. What does that take in terms of cost, equipment? Is it very flexible? If I decide tomorrow, hey, I want to do broadcast from that field out there, is that easy to do? Not unless you own one of these. Yeah. So the traditional kind of way of doing live video was lots of expensive fixed equipment. Mobility was complicated. Bandwidth was a precious resource. A lot of the content was just kind of broadcast to the masses and hope that somebody watches it, and no real way to measure, easily or exactly how many people are watching that particular channel or that particular video. But fairly low latency and fairly high reliability, correct? Now, how does that change with the internet and everybody having a cell phone in their pocket that has cameras on it and microphones on it and able to broadcast? Well, obviously, ubiquitous bandwidth makes location a lot more a lot easier to do. It's less relevant than it used to be. We have protocols like RTMP that make it really easy. You can broadcast from your phone. You can broadcast from a lot of cameras. Now, Don't get me started on RTMP. It's not my favorite protocol, and nor do I think it should be the standard, but it just happens to be the most popular right now. And there's some modern protocols like, SRT and WebRTC that can improve latency and make that make a better experience than you get with RTMP. But really what we end up with is a lot of what I call fake live video, right? These are all your free ad-supported television channels, whether that's streaming on one of your streaming platforms or that sort of thing. There's a whole lot of content that's out there and available and you can watch. And there's, how many Twitch streams are there now, Garrett? Just curious. You don't know. There's a lot. Yep. It really means that almost anybody can be a broadcaster, right? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. I think it democratizes video and media, and I think that's a healthy thing. The other thing that I didn't put on this slide, but I should have, is the fact that it's also much more measurable. You can say how many people are watching my live stream. What resolution are they watching in? Are they having problems with jitter or packet loss or these sorts of problems? You can quantitatively measure what's that viewer experience like. Where on a traditional broadcast television channel, okay, you might pay a third party that goes and does a survey of people. How much time did you watch television last week and what channels did you watch? And do you remember seeing an ad for such and such thing? But with these modern technologies and the internet, it's really easy to write in the video player itself, measure these sorts of things and tell what's going on. All right, let's talk about video on demand. So again, let's rewind 30 years in my life, back to when I was a kid growing up in Wyoming. What did video on demand look like? VHS tapes, that's exactly right. In fact, I would drive 15 minutes to the nearest town that had a video rental store. It was called Video USA. I still remember it to this day. There was no Blockbuster. There was no Blockbuster within a 4-hour drive of my house. Yeah, like I said, it was remote. And what did you do? You wandered up and down the aisles to try to find, one, a video that looked interesting to watch with no reviews or anything. Number two, that somebody hadn't already rented, which happens a lot in a small town in Wyoming. And then it was a couple of dollars a day to rent the video cassette. And then the late fees were like double that. And being a small town, everybody knew each other and everybody knew each other's business. So, if you had rented Toy Story and then somebody else wanted to watch it and you were late by a couple of days, the video store would call you on the phone and say, hey, just to let you know, there are 2 other people that want to watch this film. Would you please rewind it and bring it back? And yes, rewinding was a thing. Be kind, please rewind. And so, video on demand really was, very, 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 this very model. And it reminds me so much. There's a quote by the computer programmer Andrew Tannenbaum, who's the author of the Minix operating system, if you're familiar with that. He says, never underestimate the bandwidth of a station wagon full of tapes hurling down the highway. That was video on demand. It was all on physical media. What that meant was that you had limited availability, you had high distribution costs, slow distribution of new content, only one person could watch a video at a time, and then you had a few gatekeepers that really controlled what actually got into the distribution channels and what was able to get out there and be able to be watched. Could the average person, if they had some content, could they get that published and distributed to the video rental stores and to where people could watch it? Probably not. So there was high cost, just high barriers to entry there into getting into that. Let's compare and contrast that today. How about video on demand? How hard is it to do video on demand today? Lorenzo, if I turned to you and said, I want you to put a YouTube video up in the next 5 minutes, could you do it? Absolutely, right? It's super easy, right? And then how do we watch that? How do we stream that? Well, technologies like HLS and Dash make that super simple to stream that video in something that works fairly well, right? And yes, that takes some bandwidth, and bandwidth can be expensive, but CDNs can help with that. And in the grand scheme of things, it's hopefully you're getting somebody else to pay that bandwidth bill and not paying it yourself. But that's another topic for another day. Some of the problems we have, though, is we've got this situation where we kind of have different catalogs of content, right? We've got content on YouTube, we've got content on Netflix, we've got content on Amazon Prime, we've got content on Paramount Plus. We got content on Peacock. We got, now where do I go if I want to watch a movie or I want to watch a show? Where do I go find it? How do we how do we organize all this content? How do we index it? How do we search it? How do we know what's where? Or even if I have access to it, or do I have to sign up for yet another streaming service to be able to watch some of this content? It's a mess, right? The other thing that I worry about personally is that changing formats and changing codecs means long-term archival of some of this content is problematic. Just to use an example, how many people have used let's say you've seen a YouTube video from 3 or 4 years ago and you want to go back and find it now? Is it easy to find? No, it's not. It's there somewhere on one of Google's servers somewhere in the cloud, right? But can you find it? Can you remember the perfect search term to come up with it? No, there's just.
They just disappear.
And sometimes they just disappear, and there's no explanation and no reason why. So that's something that I worry about. But there are advantages as well, obviously. From almost anyone can get their content out there, get it distributed, and again, then measure it and see how many people have watched it. People can leave comments and reviews and those sorts of things. So that's very healthy. All right. Next up, real-time communications. What do we mean by real-time communications? Come on, it's supposed to be interactive. I don't want to just stand up here and lecture.
This is real time.
Yeah, this is real time. We're having a conversation. It's back and forth. It's not a one-way broadcast. There's multiple people involved. There's the latency is low enough that we can actually have a coherent conversation back and forth, right? Yeah, I mean, the difference between video on demand and real-time communications is just, about 6 or 7 months of lag. Yeah, exactly. All right, so again, backing up 30 years back to when I was a child in Wyoming, what did real-time communications look like? The PSTN, that was the network at the time. Yeah, for some of your younger kids in the room, that's a phone, and yes, you do have to put your finger in and then rotate it around to actually dial the phone. And what's sick and wrong is I've spent enough time in the telephony industry to be able to look at that area code, and I can tell you where that phone actually lived, based on the area code and the prefix. Utah. So I want to share a little story, and this is not going back quite so far, but Mother's Day, 1996. I happened to be living in Paraguay at the time. I was doing some volunteer work in South America, but I wanted to call my mother and wish her a happy Mother's Day, as any good son should, right? But the infrastructure in Paraguay wasn't quite like it was, where I grew up in the United States. So for me to be able to call my mother for Mother's Day meant I took a bus for an hour into the next closest town, and then I stood in line, and then when I got to the front of the line, they put me on a radio that was patched into the capital city, and then the capital city could make an international phone call and patch it into the radio, and then it would go up and over a satellite to get to the United States, and there was about 2 seconds of latency, and then trying to make this phone call to my mom, but I was wishing my mom a happy birthday, right? It was great. Really wanted me to have, to start a career in the voice over IP industry just to mess that up. But what other types of real-time communication was there back then? The conference calls. Everybody loves conference calls, right? 20 minutes in and people are still forgetting to mute and somebody else joins and who just joined? There was not a lot of other real-time communication. I do have a big, huge coaxial cable that's about that big around running through my backyard because the U.S. government decided they wanted a video calling platform for the U.S. military, and the route just happened to go through my backyard where I live in Virginia now. And it was a great video calling system. It was you could only have 2 participants, one on this end and one on this end, and so it was fixed point. And this was, late 70s, early 80s. They got it working, and it was super expensive because they had to run hundreds of miles this big, huge, shielded coaxial cable to get it to work. But it was done. But 30 years ago, that's about the best you could do with real-time communication. How about today? Oh man, today's still conference calls. Conference calls everywhere. I mean, it's conference calls with video, unless you mute your video. My favorite little anecdote I like to throw in here is the COVID pandemic. Did everybody learn how to use video calls or abuse video calls during the COVID pandemic? I certainly learned a few tricks. Like if you go into Zoom, let's say you're using Zoom just for the sake of argument, go into Zoom, change your name to connecting ... and then turn off your webcam. People think you're just having connection problems and you can get away with not sharing your video, right? That's something that kids in my neighborhood taught me. So what's changed? What other things do we have now with real-time communications that work well? Maybe a combination of video and voice and chat and screen share and be able to draw on somebody else's screen. But has it changed really that much?
More video. People tend to use more video now.
People tend to use a lot more video now, which is a good thing, which is a healthy thing. Sorry? Potato filter or the cat filter, yes. Filters are great. Do they help the communication? I don't know, sometimes. They're fun.
I do think things like FaceTime have changed people's relationships within families.
Absolutely. So for those who didn't hear Tim, he says things like FaceTime have really changed communication within families. I certainly, even though my family doesn't turn on video, we do phone calls a lot more, and group phone calls a lot more, where we get 6 or 7 or 10 people on the phone and talk about something all at once, rather than, okay, you call your brother and I'll call my sister and then we'll get back and coordinate, kind of stuff. So I think it's healthy. For me, one of the things I worry about is that we have all these great tools. Everybody, I'm sure every one of us in this room have at least one phone, if not 2 phones on them, with a browser on there that supports web RTC and can do peer-to-peer video and audio and do all these powerful things. And it's really easy to use hosted services for real-time communication like Zoom or a Jitsi Meet or something like that. What I worry about is that we don't do enough to integrate those tools into our own applications. Like if I'm on let's say I want to call, I'll call it company X just for the fun of it. I want to call company X, and have a video conversation with them. Why can't I do that directly from their website? Just click a button and be connected to them, rather than they'll send me a Zoom link and then I have to launch it in Zoom and now I'm locked into the Zoom platform and that sort of thing. I'm hoping we get to more, over the next decade or so, we get easier to integrate tools where we can integrate real-time communications into the other tools and platforms that we use easier than it is today. But that's just kind of my hope and wish there. Other thoughts on real-time communication and how it blurs the lines? What?
Part of a lot of other things too, like video games, and you have the audio channel and everything.
Yeah, it certainly impacts the video game industry. How about the broadcast industry? For those of you that come from the broadcast world, has it made a difference?
Broadcasters are now almost in the shit. Regular TV is dying.
Regular TV is dying. And when it's not, how many times do they bring on a remote guest now from Zoom or Skype or a platform like that, right? It makes it easier for them to bring in remote guests and that sort of thing, and you see a lot of that. But it's also chewing away at that kind of their defensive moat. I mean, before it was so expensive and so cumbersome to get into to be a broadcaster, and now anybody can do it, that it does kind of erode away at those protections that they had. So it's there's that old curse of may we live in interesting times, and well, I can say we definitely live in interesting times, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I haven't totally figured out yet. Probably some of both. But
So the other thing I've noticed is podcasts you can get a much wider variety of guests on podcasts because you can get them in remotely. The kind of dragging somebody into a soundproof studio, it was it's a big ask, and basically you had to get people who were obsessed with their public image, otherwise they wouldn't do it. Whereas now, it's just like another Zoom call and they'll do it. And so I can get a ton of really interesting people who will put an hour into my podcast in a way that they simply wouldn't have turned up in the studio ever.
That's fantastic. And I don't know about you, but I listen to a lot of podcasts and get to hear some really, really amazing people that if they had to be physically in the same room, that those conversations may never have happened. So that's a great point as well. All right, so I think it's just about time for lunch. I'm sure you all are hungry. You'd rather say, okay, Jared, stop droning on and let's wrap it up. What does the future look like?
More integrated tools, like
More integrated tools?
no conference calls.
No conference calls, or at least better behaved conference calls, maybe, I don't know. It could have been an email, right?
More engagement.
Betamax makes a comeback. Laserdisc makes a comeback. Do you know actually Laserdiscs are making a comeback? The price for used Laserdiscs are going up on eBay because people are collecting them and rewatching them now. It's kind of interesting.
I see more engagement as well. So, for instance, another use case that came to mind during the pandemic were live concerts where you had the world of people from home watching the concert. So the people playing, so the people from home all around the world. So that gives you a different kind of engagement as
And
well.
sports events too, they did it for MMA, for wrestling.
Yep.
Vision Pro.
Well, you do. You also have things like, better audio, better video, high definition, high dynamic range. I mean, lots of technological improvements to boot and sort of this thing. I kind of laugh. In the United States, they're actually doing a new version of the broadcast television over the air called the ATSC 3.0, which is actually going to be 4K video plus internet access over aerial broadcast, which is okay. Seems a little late to the game, but it's happening.
What are your thoughts on AR and VR?
Thoughts on AR and VR? I think AR is going to go places. It's had slow adoption so far, and I think people get more and more used to that over time. VR still, I'm on the fence about. I was an early proponent of VR, but the headsets still have a long way to go. You still have the motion sickness problems. They'll get better over time, but it's more awkward. Both just the goggles on your face problem, and then just the raw computing power and everything needed to do. If somebody wants to buy me an Apple Vision Pro, I'd be happy to try it out and give you some updated guidance, but not ready to spend that kind of coin yet on that. It's something I'm curious about, and I want to see how that progresses. It seems to be kind of the next quantum leap in at least screen resolution and that sort of thing. But the jury's still out on how it may impact folks like us, geeks in this room, talking about this sort of thing, but to the average person out there, are they really going to, strap a pair of goggles on their face to watch a movie or that sort of thing? Hard to say.
But we've lost something with all these video conferences and over and above the in-person type meetings that people used to have. I mean, the whole work from home environment and whatever. And after our talk from the Matrix guys, I say that AR and VR probably do have a very good chance of bringing that sort of personal contact back in those situations where you can't have the in-person.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love a phone call with someone or a video chat with someone, there is higher bandwidth in being able to be in a room with them and see the facial expressions and then the body movements and everything, and not just a little avatar on the screen. And that's important as well. Can't overemphasize that enough. All right, with that, I just want to wrap up by saying I think the future is bright. I think there is a future for broadcast media. It's going to be different than they've seen before. There's a future for telecommunications. It's going to be different than it was before. And there's a huge opportunity for those of us who kind of play in the space of bridging software development and broadcast media and telecommunications. The future's bright. We just got to make sure we don't ignore the lessons that were learned in the past. There's a lot of lessons that both of those industries learned that maybe we're keen to ignore or gloss over, but I think there's some really important things that we can learn from them. Anyway, thank you for coming out, and hope to chat with you during the week here.
Thank you very much, Jared. And, well, if there's any questions, otherwise, there's lunch break now. We'll be back here at 2. This has to be 2, right? Just get back here by 2, please. And, well, I'll see you later. Thank you, Jared, again.
Thank you.